House of Hammer. Feels like forever since I was last on door duty. Take my hand and down the hall we go, past door 1, remember that? Bela Lugosi in a Hammer movie? Door 2, of course, Song of Freedom, the statuesque Paul Robeson and his Lonely Road. Door 3, Sporting Love, yes, we keep that one locked up tight, don't worry. And then Death in High Heels, a room with its own ensuite hoo-ha. The Dark Road next. You know, Stanley Thurston's actually still in this room looking for his acting ability. Door 6. Who could forget the Dick Barton films? Love that room. The Room Full of Dicks. One of the more popular on the old website. Can't think why. Door 7. The home of River Patrol. Also the room where Kev stores his 20,000 pairs of nylons in preparation for the day when rationing comes back. You may think that's a crazy notion, but that's what everyone thought in 1919, when World War I came to an end and they said rationing was gone forever. Yes, Kev remembers that well. Ugh, this room smells of pork. I wonder why. Ah, yes, it's because it's PC-49's room. Celia next, in door 9, and the handle is worn down to a nub. Smokey likes to come here several times a day. Dr. Morell in room 10, poking around someone's cavity. In room 11, the Jack of Diamonds, which is technically the 11 of diamonds, so very apt. Simon the Rev Cherry there in room 12, tapping out his pipe on the hearth. Room 13, the Man in Black, Hammer's first foray to Oakley Court. Number 14, what? Room to Let. Oh yes, right, Room to Let, yes. Door 15, someone's at this door. Oh shit, it's Michael Medwin. Run. Door 16. No sign on this one. Hang on, let me peek through the keyhole. Ah yes, what the butler saw. Then we had the return of High Hazel in The Lady Craved Excitement, and our most recent trio of doors took us to the heights of the Rossiter case, the not-so heights of To Have and To Hold, and the extinguished lights of The Dark Light. Quite the journey so far, I'm sure you'll agree, and we've only really just begun. But what delight resides behind today's door? Room number 21. Well, this one is rather special. And anyone who knows me in particular will already know that I think this film is something of an underseen masterpiece. In fact, when I saw this for the first time all the way back in October of 2021, I was so taken with it that when I came to make my end-of-year list, I ranked it right at the top. You see, it's not often you see a film that somehow manages to delicately blend the worlds of code-breaking, revenge, family drama, and boxing so skillfully. Believe it, folks, you have a genuine Hall of Famer waiting in the wings for you this time. 1951's Cloudburst is a watershed movie for Hammer in many ways, an artistic, dreamlike revenge thriller that refuses to compromise when it comes to emotional impact or brutal violence. Intrigued? You should be. Cloudburst stars Robert Preston, Elizabeth Sellers, Colin Tapley, Harold Lang, and Sheila Burrell. Sheila Burrell, you say? Now there's a name that must sound familiar to you by now, and that's because she's featured heavily in 3 Hammer classics so far here on the podcast. In fact, so established has she become as a Hammer fixture by now, that we thought it only fitting for Kev to officially induct her as a Hammer hero. So Kev, take it away.
Because Peter and I aren't going to hang around here. We're going to get miles and miles away somewhere in the sun. I'll send you a picture postcard. X marks our room. Listen to your head once and for all. I've got Peter and I'm going to keep him.
Even though The Man in Black would be the first big screen appearance for Sheila Burrell as the chain-smoking evil sidekick Janice, this striking-looking woman with the pencil-thin eyebrows and razor-sharp cheekbones certainly made enough of an impression at Hammer to snag herself some equally degenerate roles in The Rossiter Case, Cloudburst, Women Without Men, and then finally as the rather potty Aunt Harriet, who loves fire and bossing Oliver Reed about in 1963's Paranoiac. Although Hammer were the first to spot her potential for the movies, by then she'd already proved herself quite accomplished on the stage. First entertaining the troops from 1942 and moving to London's Prince of Wales Theatre 2 years later, She swiftly became a permanent fixture in the capital, although she wasn't averse to going wherever the work would take her, and joined the Royal Shakespeare Company in Stratford in 1970. She would go on to join the National Theatre at the Old Vic in 1972 to play the Duchess of Gloucester in Richard II, and quite fittingly, the first witch to Anthony Hopkins's Macbeth. Well known for being tough and fiery, with a mouth like an open sewer, she was well loved and respected by some of the biggest names in British film, television and theatre, and despite enjoying her villainous roles, her formidable range could also take her anywhere. One of her personal favourite parts was as the sultry sexpot Honor. Not the one from the Rossiter case, unfortunately. This one was from the play A Severed Head, which would go on to be made as a film with Claire Bloom taking the role. It's a great film, but now I'm forever going to be thinking just how much cooler it would have been now I know this. Equally, Sheila was also considered for the role of Sister Hell in Hammer's To the Devil a Daughter. Sister Hell. It's a part made for her, surely. Like her cousin, Sir Laurence Olivier, she also had a long and distinguished acting career. It lasted over 60 years, and through this she met both of her husbands. Her first was the actor-novelist Lawrence Payne in 1944, but this was dissolved by the time Cloudburst was released. As a side note, Payne would go on to appear in Vampire Circus many years later. In 1963, she married David Sim, a portrait and theatre photographer, and they went on to have 3 children together, with 2 of them, Julius and Matthew, appearing as the children of Clarence with her in Richard III, and Matthew is still a working actor to this day. In her later years, she found herself picking up an increasing amount of parts on television, which suited her fine as she left the rigours of the stage behind her in 2003. She appeared in Heartbeat, Holby City, and was that little old lady on the NatWest commercials who complains that her bank's been turned into a wine bar. Her final appearance would be on the British soap opera Emmerdale, before her health would see her step back from acting. And after suffering a major stroke in 2009, Sheila would leave us all 2 years later, at the age of 89. The Guardian newspaper said of her, she stood at only 5'5" inches, but could fill the widest stage and hold the largest audience. Her voice was a mezzo marvel, kittenish or growling, and in later life acquired the viscosity and vintage of an old ruby port, matured after years of experience. A force to be reckoned with, let's all raise our glasses and eyebrows to Sheila Burrell.
Yes, the quite unique Sheila Burrell joins the ranks of Hammer Hero with that most eloquent of tributes. And incidentally, no one is more well-placed to extol the virtues of a ruby port than Kev Moore. On to the movie then. Cloudburst tells the tale of former World War II spy and now turned codebreaker John, played by Robert Preston, who's married one of his former espionage colleagues, Carol, played by Elizabeth Sellers. John and Carol are both haunted by their former lives during the war, but they're putting it all behind them in the hopes of finding a brighter future as a family. You see, Carol is soon to bear their first child, and resolving to leave the past where it belongs, the couple are filled with all the optimism for what tomorrow may bring.
What did the doctor say this morning?
That I've got no need to worry till August. And that you work too hard?
Hurry up, August.
You don't have to wait till then to celebrate a birthday. There's quite an important one on Saturday.
Really? Whose?
John, don't you remember?
No.
Oh.
Although I did make a list of something rather unpleasant I've got to do. Oh, yes.
What's this?
Oh, it's nothing important. Just a list of presents I'm thinking of buying you.
Why, they're in cold. What have you bought me?
Work it out.
How could anyone? Darling, please.
And then, quite suddenly, Carol and her unborn child are snatched away in a stark flash of violence, which sends John's teetering sanity veering towards the darker shadows of his past. Before he can take control of himself once more, he has resolved to seek revenge upon those who have snatched away his one chance at happiness and redemption. But in order to find them, he'll have to enlist the help of some former army buddies and trawl through the lowly, murky world of organized crime and boxing.
Good Lord, this old man sabotaged himself.
Hello, Jackie.
It's good to see you.
Good to see you.
John, this is a treat. Just wait till the wife sees you. She can't stand you, of course.
Why not?
Well, you saved my life. She'll never forgive you. What are you doing in these parts?
I want some help.
From me?
Yes.
Well, this swell boy. Come and meet the wife.
Well, another time, I'd love to, but...
Confidentially?
Yes, Jackie. I've got a job to do.
What is it?
I want you to help me trace a dark gray Buick. Number EPL 782.
EPL 782. Where was it last seen?
Near Windsor.
Windsor? That's where a night watchman was murdered.
As I believe it was.
No connection, I suppose.
None whatever. This is a personal matter. A kind of debt to be collected, that's all.
I see. It'll be done.
When the time comes, I may need some number plates.
That can't be traced.
Haven't lost the knack, have you?
That'll be the last thing I lose.
Thanks, Jackie.
Quite like old times, isn't it?
No, Jackie. It's lonelier. So long.
So long, sir.
Well, before we haymaker our way over to the round table, let's take a wild diversion into the world of weird boxing facts, courtesy of everyone's favourite featherweight. Yes, let's get ready to grumble with Smokey. Just Smokey. Like Rocky, but more kind of kidney stony.
Boxing. The sweet science. Pugilism. Stepping into that squared circle, sizing up your opponent. A battle of wits as much as a battle of strength. The deft art of outwitting one's foe, being one step ahead and sometimes, more importantly, being one punch ahead, to be crowned victor in a one-on-one contest in the most honest and beautiful manner. Or puffing up your chest, threatening to make the other person's children orphans before climbing in the ring and tearing 7 shades of out of each other in 36 minutes of pure violence and bloodshed in an offensive slugfest. Regardless of your personal opinion on boxing, it can't be understated the guts and bravery it takes to stand in front of another human being, knowing this moment could retire you, temporarily or, in some tragic circumstances, permanently. I'll lay my cards on the table and admit I am a massive boxing fan. Have been for many, many years. In my youth, I always wanted to give it a try as well. However, having been blessed with the kind of eyesight that would put Mr. Magoo to shame, that was never really an option for me. But the passion for the sport has never really left me, and in my very rare moments of downtime, I'm quite content to sit and watch clips of Rocky Marciano obliterate one person after another. Why are we here though? Well, rather tenuously, Cloudburst features a scene in a boxing gym, and one of the antagonists is a boxer. That's good enough, isn't it? I mean, it's no hand crank piece or fake beard segment, but it'll do. Also, it should be pointed out, this isn't the first time we've encountered one of these establishments with Hammer. Meet Simon Cherry had a similar scenario in its opening scenes. Boxing was, and is, in some instances, something of a working class pursuit. I mean, you always hear of amateurs and professionals alike opine about how the sport saved them from a lifetime of violence on the streets and provided them with a way to learn discipline and self-control. And that, it has to be said, is to be commended. Of course, there is the shadier side too. Its links to organised crime and money laundering are well-founded. Evidence can easily be found of boxers stood next to Al Capone or the Cray twins, beaming gleefully, but probably hiding behind a secret that they would take to their graves if they ever opened their mouths about it. Yeesh, this is all getting a little deep, isn't it? Sod this for a game of soldiers. Let's have some fun. Let's get ready to rumble! Let's have some interesting and some ridiculous facts about boxing, shall we? Round 1. The 3 highest grossing boxing films, you ask? Well, the number 1 and number 3 spots are held by Yes, you guessed it, by Rocky. But which ones will surprise you? At the top spot we have Rocky 4, and in third we have Rocky 3. And in second place, well, it's the film equivalent of Rock'em Sock'em Robots, starring the world's most unattractive man, Hugh Jackman, Real Steel. Yikes. Round 2. The longest ever boxing match? Well, the longest boxing match, with gloves anyway, in history, was 110 rounds long. It began around 9 p.m. on April the 6th, 1893, and ended the next day well after 4 a.m. Andy Bowen and Jack Burke fought for 7 hours and 19 minutes in New Orleans. Not so much a Mardi Gras as a seriously knocked off gras, it would seem. Round 3. How about the shortest ever boxing match? Well, that depends on your definition of the term match. The quickest fight lasted 1 second, when Curtis Harper left the ring 1 second after the bell rang in a dispute over his eventual payday. Oh, Curtis, you silly sausage. Round 4. George Foreman has made more money selling his grills than for his boxing career, in which he was a 2-time heavyweight champion. We have a winner. So, while boxing may have a somewhat small role to play in Cloudburst, I think I've just proved there's more to it than pummeling another person for a bit. Or something. Or I just wanted to talk about it. But I don't know. Do I have to do all the thinking for you? Well, here we are, my friends. We are still in 1951. However, we have changed locations now. Hammer has made the great leap, if you will, from terrible Oxfam shops and country houses and manors. We are now in Bray Studios, where we're going to reside for quite a very long time. So this is obviously a very good time to point out the fact that things are going to change from here on in. We're going to get different sets, more space and things like that, and we're going to utilise them very, very well, which I think is fantastic. However, does this mean an uptake in quality, or does this mean we're just going to keep on a standard edge? And especially when we're going into the first act of the film, does anyone have any thoughts on what their feelings are of the first, 20, 30 minutes of this film, considering where we've now moved to for Hammer?
Well, it's very interesting you say that, because the move to Bray seems to have spurred on a marked shift in, I wouldn't say quality, because I think there has been a lot of quality lately, in and amongst the rubbish. But with Cloudburst, I think we finally start to see a more adult style of filmmaking from Hammer. Especially, as you say, in the first act of this film, which is kind of hard to get your head around for a little while. You watch it and you go, what kind of film is this going to be? Especially for first-time viewers. They might think it's rather slow, when, in actual fact, when you hit the third way mark, you realise that it's not actually a slow film. It's a careful film, and there's a marked difference in that, and I admire it endlessly. It's a very adult film that's all about not just violence, but the reaction to violence and all the forms it takes. It's a film about the rage that's created by acts of violence, and the setup to this film. It starts very slow. You think it might be a film about codebreaking. It's very quiet and it's all conversational. And then you see a man and a woman and their relationship, and you find out she's pregnant. And it's all very kind of dreamlike in a way. You're kind of wondering where it's going to go. And then there's this shocking act of violence that happens, and the whole film pivots on that, and it becomes it's a film about acts of violence and how we choose to deal with them. And I think it's great that the film moved to Bray at this moment, because this seems to be a watershed, I think, in terms of tone.
I actually find the first part of the first act quite tedious, but I think that's reasonably intentional as well, because I think what they're setting it up as a sort of twee, happy story with associated tedium that comes with that, only for that sort of idyllic look at a fairy tale life to be shattered in quite spectacular fashion. And the first time I watched it, I wasn't particularly sympathetic to the opening 10-15 minutes. In fact, I found it quite laughable. But regardless of whether I think it's perfectly done or not, the intention to create a contrast between what goes before and then what comes after the incident that occurs is very successful.
I agree, and I love the words you used there. Both of you said sort of like it's dreamlike, it's idyllic, it's twee. However, with repeated watchings, that makes a lot more sense to me. This feels like it's Hammer trying to pull the rug out from under your feet. So you give me 25 minutes of, as you say, hushed tones of learning these relationships, vocations and things like that. And also this quite fairy tale-like love story that is unfolding in front of our eyes, because everything is perfect. They're so deeply in love. They're about to have a child. All is well. But then that's when you can just hit a massive sucker punch to, as we say, for a horrific incident. But isn't that just going to lead you up to a wonderful bit of drama and to lead you into a quite excellent way of pivoting from that into a thriller? And let's not beat around the bush. Okay, it's 51. I mean, there are harsher examples than this, but into quite a brutal thriller as well.
Yeah,
definitely. It's very clever, don't get me wrong, and there are some dark elements to it. Don't get me wrong, we talked about this off mic, but there are some wonderful comedic elements to it as well, which we'll come to, I'm sure. But it's also, for me, that's the overriding sensation, is that you get this, floaty, ethereal build-up, and then just suddenly, bam, we're in a completely different film now. Yeah. And that is massively to its credit.
I do love the relationship that you've got set up here by Robert and Elizabeth, as John and Carol. The whole way that they work together, and when you start to learn a bit more about the background, because obviously the background is they've met during the war, and this film is based in 1946, so it's just afterwards. It's during the fallout.
That's very important as well.
It is. But the way that they actually start to talk to each other in a German prison camp by Morse code through a wall, and it's just such a beautiful story that's kind of hinted at. You only really get pieces of it all the way through, but it's lovely that you've got all this extra bits that are sort of clues to their background, like the whole Zimmerman thing and with the group and Operation Crayfish and details like there's no explosives near the door. There's just so many little allusions to this past life that these two have been through. So it's kind of like they're trying their best to move on, and they really are suffering from PTSD to a certain extent, both of them.
100%.
Yeah, absolutely.
He certainly is, yeah.
Yeah, he definitely is.
Yeah.
So, it as Kev said, it's set after the war. And these characters, all of the characters in there are very affected by the war, and they're all bruised, and they've come through this thing. In particular, he has gone through more than most, I think it's fair to say. He was tortured terribly as part of the resistance, and she refused to give him up, even though she was tortured as well. Yeah. And then they sort of came together after the war and formed this relationship, and nothing could ever break them apart from a couple of roughneck crooks who are out one night trying to get away from a crime. A tragedy occurs and they are torn apart, and it's made all the more hurtful by the fact that she was pregnant at the time, and that they spent a good portion of this film talking about the future they hope to have, and isn't it great that we finally get to have it after all we went through. And the first act in this film, it's very odd. You watch it and you go, it's very slow. And then suddenly you realise that actually what's happened is they've spent 10 minutes treating you like an adult. They've been, letting you in on the most intimate parts of these two people's relationships. Not just them two, but also her family. You meet her sister, her mother. You know about his job. You know that he's a very quiet man, doesn't want anything to do with violence again. He's got, all this past. And then this horrible thing happens. And I think there's a scene just before, I mean, it's no spoiler to say that she's the one that dies because it happens so early in the film. Yeah. But, crooks who are outrunning a crime run her over. It's the most horrendous, awful accident. Basically, she's in the road and they're talking, and these crooks are trying to get away, and they just run her over basically, and it's awful.
And back over her,
and then back over her to get the car free. It's just it's so awful. And as you say, for 51, it's pretty brutal.
Wow.
But because that happens, it just it sends this like crack through the screen. It's like there's a schism that happens, and you can just see him just go. But what I was trying to get to was there's a moment earlier in the film where they're talking about the criminals because it's on the radio. There's two people on the run for having killed a security guard or something, isn't it? And And someone on the radio says, his wife says it's a tragedy that this security guard was killed, and she comments on it. Elizabeth Sellers, who plays, the wife in this film, comments on that moment. She says, if that was me, if I was the wife and someone had killed my husband, nothing would prevent me from meting out the worst kind of justice upon someone who'd taken away the person I love. And it zooms in on her face, and you think to yourself, yeah, I wonder if I would feel like that.
If I were that night watchman's widow, I'd get them first.
Would you?
I'd try. I'd hound them with as little pity as we hounded Zimmerman. I couldn't help it, John. My hatred would overwhelm me like a cloudburst.
But you can tell after she is murdered minutes later by these criminals, the same criminals, that he thinks this is what she wanted. She wants me to avenge her like crazy. And I'm going to do everything I can. And that's when this film becomes the story of what happens when you take away a person's reason for living. There's nothing for him left. And the only thing he has is her dying wish, which he perceives as her dying wish, which is whatever happens, even if you die doing it, I want you to avenge me. That's how he sort of twists it to himself. Every part of it. He becomes
Robert Preston is John Wick.
Yeah, basically. He becomes a wraith, doesn't he? It's like
It does,
seriously, it's quite a scary transformation. Yeah.
So you don't kill my puppy, you kill my missus, and I'm coming for you.
I mean, it's quite a brave film, I think, because it asks a lot of the viewer, and particularly, putting yourself back 70 years, I think it asks a lot of the viewer at the time, because you're absolutely right, Adam. It's her sort of dying words are about how she would avenge, if she was the wife of the night watchman, she'd avenge his death. But also, it's quite nuanced how when she's gone, his reasoning is yes, it's largely that. But he also talks about how he'd promised her that no harm would ever come to her after the war, and he talks latterly about the sacrifices that she made for him. So obviously he's got all of this guilt. But regardless of that, so there's as a viewer, there's our out. That's why we can sort of follow him into this path of vengeance. But later in the film, we're asked, and I think I've been thinking back, this is the first time in any Hammer film where there's cold-blooded murder, pre-planned cold-blooded murder, and certainly cold-blooded murder by our protagonist, or at least our anti-hero, because there's no two ways about it. He does something later in this film that is horrendous. And
it's hard to watch, isn't it?
It really, really is. As unsympathetic as the character to whom the thing is being done is, it's still, for most rational people, will think, oh, it's a bit strong, that, isn't it? But I think it's to the film's credit that it is brave, because, as you say, two or three of the scenes, even now, sort of resonate and make you feel, oh, that's quite shocking, really.
Yeah, absolutely.
Absolutely.
There's also one bit that does take me out of this a bit, and it's when Carol actually falls down. It's very much a Vic Reeves kind of, oh, look, Vic, I've fallen.
Yeah,
there
is that. It's a very Amdram.
It is very, which is a shame, because there's much better editing later on subsequent incidents, and I just feel like they were trying to ham it up and make a bigger thing of it, but I don't think that carries across too well. I think that's the only thing I've got against that little bit, because it. That and the darling counter. There's a lot of darlings in this film, again. A heck of a lot of darlings. Within 20 minutes, I think we'll go about 400 of them. There's also the background stuff to Robert Preston's John Graham, where he's working now in a coding department. Now, do we figure out what this coding department is? Is this part of the Foreign Office, or is it something to do with the Scotland Yard?
I don't think it's ever explicitly said
No.
exactly what it is.
I think it's just the cryptography in general.
He mentions to the inspector later that they are part of the same branch of the government, but not the same, doesn't he? So,
yeah.
So I doubt. It's not going to be Scotland Yard, but it'll be some MI5 or MI6 type thing.
Yeah, because they're trying to get some sort of Japanese war criminal, aren't they?
That's right.
Yeah, but then you've just got 9 people sat about muttering to each other in this room, and they've been working at this thing for 5 years, this particular code, to get this Japanese war criminal. And it just so happens that when Kaju turns up that day, they go, "Oh, it's all right, we've cracked it now after 5 years." Don't you think they've just been milking it for 5 years because they want more tea and scones?
Yep.
What I like about that is, as well, you get a decoding montage. So you get people moving letters about and other people making numbers.
Yeah.
But then someone's doing crosswords. And you think, surely that's not decoding.
No, like I said, he's milking it.
Well, while we're on the subject of codes and code breaking, let's drop on over for a visit with that most fierce fan of all things cryptic, not a fan at all, the Alan Partridge of Alan Turing's, Mr. Ben Taylorson.
Codes and code breaking aren't quite at the heart of Cloudburst, but the fact that our hero John Graham is a cryptanalyst is significant. Hence, I've chosen to take a quick look at the world of codes. Goodness knows why. I am, after all, the man with the pathological loathing of cryptic crosswords, because I can't do them and hence they're stupid. I'd also rather take a naked tumble through a thistle patch than do a Sudoku, and as a frustrated youngster, I once threw a Rubik's Cube out of a second-story window as I'd tired of even the method of last resort, unpeeling the little coloured stickers and replacing them so it looked as if I could do it. But alas, here we are. Codes. Get in. The word cryptanalysis comes from the Greek words kryptos, meaning hidden, and analeion, meaning to analyse. Fundamentally, it's the process of analysing information in order to breach cryptographic security systems and gain access to the contents of messages, or ciphertexts, that have been encrypted using a cipher. A cipher being an algorithm for performing encryption or decryption, effectively a series of well-defined steps that can be followed as a procedure. Now, if you're already feeling a bit lost by this talk of algorithms, ciphers and Rubik's Cubes, let me clarify it a little bit. A very simple cipher might be assigning a letter of the alphabet a number. So, say A becomes 1, B becomes 2, and so forth. In this case, the coded message 215189147, when decoded, would spell the word boring. Perhaps the most well-known cryptanalyst of them all was Alan Turing, who devised several techniques for speeding up the breaking of German ciphers during World War II, including the Enigma codes. But the history of cryptanalysis can be traced back as far as the 9th century to Arab scholars, and in particular to a chap called Al-Kindi, who is regarded as the first codebreaker in history for his works that contain the first ever description of the method of frequency analysis. Nowadays, of course, everything is encrypted, be it the epic banter between you and the lads in the WhatsApp group, your smartwatch telling your fitness app of choice that you still have 8,000 steps left to do today, or that Zoom call with the in-laws where you spend 20 minutes talking to their foreheads. Isn't modern life terrific? Now, the next logical steps as we continue to rock down to Decryption Avenue would be for me to talk about the different methods of complex ciphers, cryptographic systems, and attack methods. These would include boomerang attacks, sandwich attacks, and rainbow tables. But we're not doing any of that, as even by this point my understanding of, and indeed my interest in, complex cryptography has already been stretched to breaking point. Instead, let's have a look at 5 fun codes that kids can use to write secret letters. That's right, I've found my level, and I'm comfortable with it. Code number 1, reverse code. This is where you just write everything in reverse. Simple, but effective. It's the kind of thing that would briefly flummox the famous Five or Scooby-Doo and the gang until one of them accidentally decodes it with a mirror. So not the most secure method of coded communications, more appropriate for secret love notes than nuclear launch codes. Code number 2, the half-reverse alphabet code. Here you write out the alphabet letters from A to M, then write the letters from N to Z directly underneath them. You then simply exchange the top letters for the bottom letters, and vice versa. So at first glance it's indecipherable nonsense. But if you know your cipher, then Vizbuk Skidoo Argot Boing Boing translates as enemy submarine spotted, prepare torpedo. Code number 3, every second letter code. Not to be confused with the classic Paul Daniels TV game show, Every Second Counts, this is a method by which a message is decrypted by reading every second letter, and when you finish, you start again with the letters you missed. Okay, so to create a message in this code, you would begin to type your message leaving a space between each letter, and then when halfway through the message, return to the beginning and enter the rest of it in the spaces in between the letters that comprise the first half. Clear? No? Wow, man, this is a kid's code. If I had pictures that might help, but this is an oral medium, so we are where we are. Code number 4, the book cipher. This involves creating a code by providing a page number, line number, and a word from a specific book for each word in your secret message. Naturally, it can't just be any book, but has to be, the same book with the same printing to ensure that page, line, and word position match. I mean, imagine if I'm creating the code using Jurassic Park and you're trying to decipher it using Ken Bruce's Popmaster Quiz book. Confusion would reign, and messages would be lost. And our final code, the Cardan Grill code. Now, this requires a tool. Not a claw hammer or a torque wrench, no, a code cracking tool, which is a template used by both the sender and the receiver. Only the person holding this exact template can crack the code. Now, imagine, it's a bit of card, effectively, with some squares or holes cut in it. The creator of the secret message then writes their code on a piece of paper in line with the cut-out sections of the card. They then create superfluous sentences around the message to hide the meaning within. On receipt, using an identical tool, the receiver can decode the hidden messages amongst the guff. More cultured listeners will recall a cinematic depiction of this particular type of secret communication tool in the 1997 action classic Con Air. So, there you have it. Codes! What fun. Now I'm off to do something more befitting of my intellect, like a dot-to-dot or some colouring in.
Before we move on, I would like to point out a scene which I thought was very unexpected and very powerful. So obviously he's having to deal with the death of his wife, and his mind is hell-bent. We don't quite know yet on revenge, but it's getting there. You can tell there's something ticking over in his head. But he stops and he takes the time to ask his mother-in-law and sister-in-law to live with him.
Yeah.
I love this scene because it's almost like he can feel their pain, doesn't really want to show them how much he's hurting, and offers his own life as recompense for their daughter's loss. He doesn't say, I want you to come and live with me, I'm your friend, whatever. He says, from now on, I'm your son. I'm not your son-in-law. Treat me as your son. You're my family. It doesn't matter how, what happens to us. We're together for life. I really love that scene.
There's something I've got to say, so I'll get it over quickly. We all want to burst, but somehow we haven't because we're trying to help each other. I need your help more than you need mine.
Darling, if there's anything we can do.
There is. I want you to stay with me.
Of course we will.
I don't mean for a little while. I don't even mean till the time we can speak of her without choking. I mean always.
John.
I'm going on living in this house. I'm going to buy that field. Because what would be good for my children will be good for other people's. But you're all that's left to me of Carol. Don't let's drift.
Of course not, darling.
This is your home if you want it. Everything that's in it is yours if you want it. I'm not your son-in-law. I'm your son if you want it.
So
it was powerful.
Beautiful. And the great thing is it didn't need to be there. That's the mark of a good writer. The whole of this film is just, and the writing on it is incredible. Even the last scene where, the resolution happens, the interplay between him and the police officer, everything they say to each other, the police officer isn't mad with him. They respect each other so much. I won't spoil anything, but, everything in this film is just so perfectly written. Even we'll get on to the next scene, which is basically where he tracks down the guy that was driving the car that night and, tortures him. But what he says to him and the way he responds in that scene is like it's like watching an actual torture scene. It's horrible.
Torture porn.
Sorry.
What do we think he's actually doing to him? I know it's something to do with his
This is
nerves,
what I was trying to work out.
but I have no idea what on earth he's actually doing to him.
I think he's
doing
actually
something to a
psychologically
nerve.
torturing him. He's basically saying he's going to do things to him, but he's not actually doing anything. But he's just terrifying this guy that's strapped to the chair instead.
I just assumed he had hold of his something in his wrist or something, and he was twisting it or something horrible. I don't know. I suppose
Chinese
that's the whole
burn.
point, is that you're maybe meant to make up in your imagination what you think he's doing, but he's obviously doing something because the guy gets a sweat on and he's not having it.
Well, doesn't he mention that when I was being tortured, they had a nerve, or when she was being tortured, they had a nerve open, and they were tightening this thing on her nerve, and that's what I'm going to do to you. And then you see him go, oh, I'll tell you anything, and you just think, God Christ, what's he done behind that beam? There's definitely something happened. Yeah, it's very restrained, but you can feel the pain. Even though it's just two faces talking to each other, you know something awful is happening.
This is what I wanted to go into, okay? Right, so you make this dramatic shift from that scene of him talking to her family, who are now his family, okay? You take that shift, and we are gone from romance to sadness, and we are now into full-on revenge, okay? He is assembling his Avengers, if you will.
I love them as well.
It's the A-team.
Yeah, sure.
We will come on to that very shortly, but he's keeping them at a distance, and the way he keeps them at a distance is another part of the film that I loved as well.
Yeah.
So he's using his power and his influence as the leader of his former troop or squad or whatever they were at the time, but he's not letting them too far in because he obviously knows that this could go south very easily, very quickly.
Yeah,
exactly. So this is exactly what he's done with the family. So he's thinking, right, if I die or if I go to prison, they're safe. They've got the home. They've got all my possessions. They're fine. If my friends are in peril, or if I die or if I end up in prison, they're safe because, quote unquote, they don't know anything, right? And so he's so clever and so precise about it that it is, as you say, the script writing is fantastic. But I want to throw it open to you guys and sort of say, how is the switch from this romance drama into a full-on proper revenge flick from a tiny little British studio in 1951? Does it hold up? Does it stand up? Is it good?
I think the switch is more believable because it just goes from this to that. Usually you have to build up, especially if it's like an action thriller or something like that. But with this, it's kind of like, I just witnessed my pregnant wife being killed and then backed up by a car, and then her dying wish was for me to get revenge on someone, and you can just see the thing split in his mind. And he gets through the funeral and he makes sure his family are going to be okay, and then he devotes his entire being to making sure that the people responsible are going to pay like crazy for what they did to him, not to his wife, to him. And he goes back to his roots. He embraces his old life. He goes back to the people he knew in the army. He's got a technician guy who helps him build plates for his car and tracks down the guy. He goes to the boxing gym, the rough guy. I need to know who this man is. I want to know his movements and stuff. And they all offer. The brilliant thing is they all offer to say, we'll go further. What do you want us to do? No, I want to keep you at a distance. You don't want any part of this. And he keeps them all at bay, he keeps the family at bay. And like you say, this is his revenge mission. It's not anyone else's. He doesn't want anyone else to be hurt. This is his revenge mission. And that's how you know that his mission is because it's hurt him. Not her, not them, it's him. It's what is done to him.
It's all his. Yeah. He owns it.
Yeah, exactly. And that's another thing that I think could well have been like a trope of a script. It could have been a scriptwriter saying, no, let's get more people in because that'd be fun. We can make more, it could be more action based, whatever.
Could have been the Dirty Dozen.
Yeah, we'll have guys fighting guys while he's channeling through the room to get to the guy he needs. It could have been that bull, but it's not at all. It's a very quiet revenge film, but it's more brutal for that. And eventually he finds the guy he's supposed to find, and there's a chilling scene where he tortures him, as we've talked about, and then an even more chilling scene where he kills the guy, which I think is brilliantly done. Yeah. He says, you killed my wife, you ran her over, okay? And he puts him on a lane and just says, right, go. Starts the car, basically. And this guy's looking for a tree to get through, a fence to get over, anything, and he can't. And it's one of the most chilling killing scenes ever. It's brilliantly done. Brilliant. I think that your question was, what's the escalation like from quiet, loving scene to brutal revenge? I think it works brilliantly.
There's also some subtleties because you realise that he's never been far away from his old operational standards, because if you look around the mansion, you know, their house, when the mother and her sister are there afterwards, there's no photographs of him. All the photographs are of Carol. There's not one picture of those two together. It's as if he doesn't exist. It's as if he's there just for her. So it does make this completely personal. But the car running him over, oh my God.
It's like out of the horror playbook, isn't it? You know,
it is,
like,
very much, yeah.
And,
I tell you what it reminds me of as well. It reminds me of the room in Time Bandits when the wall goes back and then
I thought you were going to say the room, the film. I was like, no.
Yeah, I was going to say, what? Glad you clarified.
No, just the way that it looms up, but it's just physically impossible to run somebody over at that speed, I'm afraid. You'd probably give his shin a nasty chafing because he runs over him at about 5 miles an hour. I think the best he can do is say, "Can you just lay down a minute, man? just to run a ramp over you."
Then he backs over him, you see. Then he goes back over him and then backs over him.
There was a touch of the end of Prometheus about it to me. It was like, no, Mick, run to the side. Don't run in a straight line because he's just going to run you over. Go in the bushes. Stop running up the road.
That's how you escape alligators, you know. You run in a zigzag pattern.
Yeah, well, if only someone had told him it works on cars as well. But a couple of other things I'll say about that. I mean, the scene of not quite torturing your victim to death, but certainly giving them a hard time that ultimately ends in their demise is kind of a staple of every revenge film now. I mean, sure. You know, you think sort of Man on Fire, Taken, they all have that scene where he finds the person and he does something unpleasant to them and ultimately they don't get out of it. So I think that's a nice early
3
example
days
of
to
that.
kill.
Well, yeah, absolutely. Good old Kevin Costner. And what I would say as well, he even has his little throwaway flippant line that he gives him before he kills him. "I'm going to take you for a driving lesson," he says. And then he runs him over, which I quite enjoyed.
Didn't you guys find that quite refreshing though, right? So I mean, granted, it's a sign of the times, but he doesn't get tooled up. You know, he doesn't cover himself in a wall of guns. You know, he's very calculated. He knows what he needs. He only gets a couple of bits. He gets his information he needs. He gets the item he needs. He has a gun, but who knew that the most valuable bit of kit that he needed through all of this is a torch?
Well,
the torch saves his life 3 times.
Or an Austin 7.
But also, force of will. There's that point where he unties him after torturing him, and you think, well, you know, maybe because there's so many, because this is a 1951 film, it's black and white stuff. You know, you imagine he's gonna have a break for it now, but because Robert Preston's force of will is so bloody strong in this film that, you know, you would just go, "I'll do whatever you want. You can run me over." Whatever. You kind of feel like you would do that.
He is quite a big lad as well, Robert Preston, isn't he? He's quite stocky. He's got presence.
Don't you think he has the most amazing face? Like, some of his line delivery, I think, is a bit stampy. Like, he delivers lines all the time. But I think his
well,
face...
he is Tom Atkins, so that makes sense.
He looks like a wood carving. He's got a very large face. It's very scary. It's very imposing. He has the most amazing face. In fact, this whole film is a film of amazing faces. Like Elizabeth Sellers, who plays his wife, is one of the most beautiful women in the world. You know, it's all of the faces, even when the boxer guy Mickey's being tortured, and he's looking up towards the light. There's kind of like a Christ-like, like illuminated thing to it. The whole film is just so well. What? I
enjoyed that. I just enjoyed the analogy. Just here's me enjoying life.
Here's Ben enjoying Jesus. Okay.
Again.
Right. Well, but before we move on, though, can I just? I want to ask you guys a question before we move on to the denouement. Let's just. There's a scene here, right? So the inspector who's been tracking John, who suspects John is what is now known as the. What killer?
Python killer, isn't it?
Python killer. Thank you. Sorry.
Yeah, Kid Python.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. So he's tracked him down to where he thinks the female who was involved in the crime is, and John and the inspector have a bit of a face-off. Again, the torch saves him. And I want to ask you, Les, right? Between us, we have seen thousands and thousands of films.
Literally.
Has anyone ever seen a scene in a film where someone gets a window not just broken over them, but I mean literally crushed over their arm? I have never seen that in a film ever. Please tell me, raise your hands, real, metaphorically and literally, if you have ever seen that before.
Not even in a Korean.
The only thing it reminded me of was the end of Ghost.
Yeah, Ghost, I was going to say.
That doesn't count.
It does count.
It does not count, because that was just the glass, it wasn't the frame. That's what I'm saying. The frame being crushed.
Sorry,
over someone's
Smokey, you should have been more specific with your window.
I was specific. But Ben wasn't listening.
There is a scene.
Excuse me, I'm never wrong.
There is a film where a window like that comes down on someo's hand. It's a horror film. I can't think what it is off the top of my head.
Mr. Jolly Lives Next Door.
It's not The Omen,
like comic
is it?
strip.
It smashes someone's hand. I can't think what it is. It's not one of the dreadful Amityville horror sequels. It could be.
It might be.
It's I think it's Tenebrae. It's either Tenebrae or Suspiria.
Right, anyway, someone
Fair
gets
enough.
a window.
Yeah, window trauma.
It's
Going back to this film though, that scene is really funny because his arm's there, and like the script obviously said bring window down on arm, but as he said, he still doesn't stop with that. He like smashes the window frame over his arm.
It's wonderful. I loved it. I absolutely loved it. Right, okay, my friends, then. Let's move on to the denouement of the film. So, John has his revenge, basically. This is a revenge film. He has his revenge against the killers of his poor, unfortunate wife. So, where do we go from here? Does he run away? Does he try and kill himself? Or does he give himself up? There are many, many options we have here. Obviously, we're not going to give away the ending. I don't think we should. But the way they chose, was that the right way?
I think it was the only logical way the film could end, given that what we knew about him as a character and a man. I think that the way in which I like the fact that it alludes to a different ending that then doesn't occur, which they telegraph quite early on in the film. I won't describe what it is, but because I'm not going to spoil it. But I was satisfied with the ending, I think is what I'm saying.
Yeah, I think the ending was kind of perfect, to be honest, because it wasn't about going out in a blaze of glory. It was about achieving what you meant to achieve, and he did. And it didn't matter what the consequences were, whether it was, a death or whether it was being arrested. The fact was that he'd lost everything in life worth living for. So all he wanted to do was achieve what he perceived to be her dying wish. And then whatever happened to him afterwards was inconsequential. So yes, I definitely think it worked.
Yeah, the whole subplot with Inspector Davis, it's just so perfectly paced. It's running
brilliant.
on a parallel. Yeah, it runs on a parallel. It's basically set up when the python killing happens, and he's just so tantalizingly close so many times on the trail. At one point he actually says something like, you've got to go into the mind of the killer, and he's actually figured out how big he'll be and, what his stature will be, and he even figures out that his right arm is going to be hurt. He's really processing it all, and you think, hang on, this is 20 years before the FBI started doing profiling, and he's already on it. He's doing it. So well written. But yeah, the whole Inspector Davis face-off, kind of, the way that he's building to it, perfect. Yeah,
I agree with that. It was something Kev and I discussed off mic, Adam, was that this bore a little resemblance to the film Obsession. The ending, a sort of gentleman's agreement that something bad is going to happen, your fate is going to be met. However, we do have time for a drink, and a clink of our glasses, a little high hazel to themselves, and just sort of say, this is what's going to happen. But we can still do it in a civilized manner, and I think that's a fantastic way to end a film, because he could have taken the easy way out. He could have done, or he could have gone on a kill crazy rampage. He could have strapped up like Schwarzenegger in Commando, but he didn't. He was a gentleman. He stuck to his principles. Well, it is a shame in so many ways. But
at one point, doesn't he actually mention that he doesn't agree with
Schwarzenegger?
weapons?
No, he doesn't.
He doesn't agree with Schwarzenegger.
No, he doesn't.
He doesn't agree with using weapons.
Oh, he's like Batman. Oh, okay. So he's Batman. Okay. Robert Preston is Batman.
One of the cars.
One of the best things about this film is that halfway through it shifts to become a police procedural, which is a very brave step of when you've set all the story up, when you've had that first act, when you've had the rampage of revenge begun, to then say, right, let's put all that aside now. Everything you've come to know, let's put all of that aside and make it a police procedural. This is one of the only examples of that I think really works, because not only do you get this all of a sudden Columbo character turning up, and putting it all together in a logical way as well. Not like he just walks in and goes, right, I know who did it, so I'm just going to play games with them. Like, he has a few scenes where he's theorising about what could have happened, and they're all wrong. And you're going, no, that's wrong. And then suddenly he says something, no, wait a minute, that couldn't have worked. No, wait, let's go back. If we swap that for that, and you go, oh, you're getting closer now. And he has this whole scene where he's theorising about what could have happened.
Warmer,
and you go,
colder.
You're watching him going, you're nearly there, sunshine. And then all of a sudden he hits it, and he hits it, and you go, oh, he's clever, man. And then you think to yourself, I've just been taken in by a writer, because a writer wrote that. And of course he knows what God. So in that respect, it's genius script. I'm sorry. Excuse the swearing.
It's fine.
But then to have a police procedural come on top of what we already have, and then not just that, but a police procedural to meet, a revenge thriller, and then all of a sudden it becomes this buddy film as well, because he teams up with Preston to figure out who could have done the crime, and all of a sudden,
so clever.
After 2 or 3 scenes together, he comes to realise, crap, this is the guy I'm looking for.
Yeah.
And it's like, whoa, there's so much going on in this film. It's like 8 different plot lines, and they just weave together seamlessly. It's a brilliant.
He's
brilliant
teaming up
film.
with the copper to catch himself.
To catch the guy. He teams up with the guy he trusts and loves and thinks is amazing. To catch him, it's, oh, God. I mean, it's
glorious.
It's a masterpiece.
Like Red Dragon.
That's very true.
Yeah.
Very true.
It's very true. Okay, then. Okay, before we get out of here, there are 3 things I want to go through. 1 is your rating, obviously. 2, I would like your full, honest opinions on whether this is a step up from Hammer and where we go from here. And then 3, just a little ode to Kev, is that if you had to be a boxer, what would your boxing name be?
Do you want to be a boxer?
Exactly. And so, because Kev came up with that one, we're going to him first. So, rating, Hammer Future, boxer. Kev.
Rating, not quite there. It's nearly a 10, but not quite. Partly because of the bits I've mentioned before, there's bits that could have been tighter. I did like the fact that they set up the criminals as real criminals by killing the one night watchman's dog, which he actually says is a nice little thing, which means that the dog has some sort of fan club.
John Wick?
Yeah, it's John Wick all over again. But yeah, there's some beautiful bits. And John's house, again, full of headshots. There's just lovely details like that. Now then, step up for Hammer? Definitely. This is the first time we've actually seen them really go out and about a bit. Fair enough, there's quite a few bits that are shot at Bray, but there's not many internal shots, partly because at the time they were still building Bray, and at one point this Francis Searle says that if you're flushing the toilet upstairs, filming has to stop, which is great news.
Filming has to stop downstairs when you flush upstairs, wasn't it?
Yeah. So lovely that they've managed to figure that one out. Yeah, it's a fantastic film, and boxer name. Mm-hmm. Trying to think of one that's repeatable.
You came up with the question.
I know, and then realised that mine's not broadcastable.
Just say it and I'll bleep it out.
Okay. Well, I think I'd stick with me musician's name and go. It's a very small hand.
Nice.
Oh, my word. Benjamin?
I'll do mine in a different order for a reason that will become apparent. Future of Hammer. This does feel like a step up. I back with exactly what Kev said about it's nice that there were a few locations. I did notice, you probably did as well, one hilarious matte background that was meant to be the countryside with an open door, which really amused me. But yeah, it did feel like a step up in quality, and I am enthused about the next few films now as well. Boxer name. Probably something that implied lots of work but little reward. So I don't know. Mr. Persistence, or Sugar Ray Useless, something like that. And as for my rating, I'll give it a 9. I really like this film, but I can't give it a 10, and I can't give it a 10 because of some of the dialogue. Now, if you will allow me to go through some of my favourite lines of dialogue here.
Please.
Yes.
These are responsible for the reasons that it loses a star or a mark. Okay, I will add some context to these as well, because otherwise they won't make any sense. Right, early on we have John and Carol, and they're at a school where their future child will go. And John looks at the school and says, "Bye, you're a lucky building." You just think, no one says that. What are you doing?
You've never been in love, Taylorson.
Obviously not, because I've never said to my wife something like, "Stay angry, darling, it gives you a dimple," or is it dirt?
Well,
you've never looked at your wife from behind.
now we know where you're going wrong, don't we?
All we knew was he had a mole on his forehead and he liked cream cheese.
That's such a good line.
I think that's Shakespeare, wasn't it?
He's a senior advisor to the Treasury. He was injured in the pelvis. I'm sure he won't miss it. What are you talking about? And finally, the last one, which makes perfect sense, but I'm afraid it's too much ham for one man. You've broken so many codes, John, but you shouldn't have broken the moral code.
Oh, yeah. Oh, don't forget we get the policettes as well.
See, my rating was a 9, but now it's a 10.
That's absolutely wonderful. Well done, Ben. So we're on to you, Adam. How about you?
Well, I don't think I made any secret about the fact that I saw this film some time ago and was very, very taken with it. I loved the fact that it just bucks convention at every turn. I love the, after the initial murder happens, there's no whirling scene where he goes a bit mad or anything like that. There's this really crazy montage thing where he sees the number plate of the car over and over again, and the music doesn't go. It's very dreamlike. It's like a dream. This film. There's no histrionics at all. It's a very quiet revenge film, and that makes it more scary when the brutal stuff happens. I love the humanity in it. I think the way that John sticks himself to her family afterwards. I found that really authentic. I don't know. I just really bought it. There's a great scene where. Because during the scene where his wife is killed, he reaches into the car to stop the perpetrators, and Sheila Burrell, who we know from Man in Black and other hammer hits so far, she snatches up her nail scissors and stabs him in the hand. And there's a scene later on where he's in the codes office and he touches the scissors with the hand that was stabbed by her scissors, and he recoils, and it's like a really Freudian, whoa, kind of, you get a real pullback. I love the fact that it's an amazing snapshot of 1951 Britain and the way lanes used to look and the way the world used to look. And I thought the ending to the film was really emotional, very quiet, very understated. Didn't have to be that quiet, but brilliantly done for it. Very respectful, incredibly written, beautifully made film. Total marvel. An absolute criminally underseen film. This should be on every British film collector's shelf, I think, and no one's ever heard of it. It's Cloudburst from 1951. It's an absolute 10 for me. I can't fault it. There are minor faults, like you say, with dialogue and stuff, but I mean, overall, the effect of the film is incredible. It's insane that not more people have seen this film. It's absolutely insane. If you think about British cinema of the 50s, 40s and 30s, creaky. There's no stellar classics that you could watch today and go, whoa, that feels very modern. And yet here we have Cloudburst from 1951. You could put this film alongside the cinema of today and people would just go, wow, that was a really great film. It doesn't matter how old the audience is, how young they are, anything. You could put this film on at a cinema anytime and people would react to it in the right way. So I think, it's definite 10 for me. I think if you haven't seen it, then search it out because it's a real piece of work and definitely one of early Hammer's best. And if I was a boxer, Rocky Parmigiano, because I'm a big fan of cheese. That's a bit proved.
Nicely done. Well, I'll quickly go through mine. We've been doing this almost a year. At time of recording, 9 days we'll have been doing this a year. And I'm putting these into sort of 3 brackets now. So we had our soundstage days, we've had our country manor days, and now we're into the Bray days. And so far, in my own personal opinion, we've had 3 9s. We've had Celia, we've had Rossiter Case, and we've had this. This is a 9. I think they're all... Those 3 are the touch points of each of those phases. So far, obviously, because we're in Bray now for quite a while. We're still in 51. We're not going to get out of 52 this year. So, you know, we've got a long way to go. This is brilliant. This is spectacular. What a great film. Robert Preston is wonderful. In fact, the entire cast is wonderful. Not a weak link. I thoroughly enjoyed every performance that was on the screen. It's got a lovely slow build up. I appreciated that more, just like Ben was saying, on the second go around, because you forgive me for sounding a bit, but you understand their love a bit more, and you understand what he has lost and why he wants revenge more. And so that was excellent. Yeah, it's a wonderful film. And agree with you, Adam, this needs to be more well known as a slice of British film noir, if you will, especially the sort of the last, I don't know, 40, 50 minutes. Brutal revenge British film noir from the 50s. Bring it on, you know. Let's have more of that, please. I was struggling for a boxer nickname, but I thought I would use a callback from something that Adam mentioned several episodes ago, but also because I think it could be quite an interesting tactic if I am in a boxing match. And so I'm going with Kid Leprosy. So that would just kind of fox people. You say, is his arm on the floor? No, bang! And then see, down. Kid Leprosy all the way. Nice. World heavyweight champion.
Just a quick note. You remember when I did the whole thing about Francis Searle?
I thought you were going to say leprosy, but yes, sorry, yes, we did.
About leprosy. Yeah, Francis Searle. Yep. And I watched a lot of Francis Searle films, and honestly, this is by far head and shoulders above anything else he's ever done. This is his strongest bit. Now, whether it's because it's something he's been nursing for a few years with Leo Marx, you know, because they co-wrote it together during the war, it could be that, but good grief, it really lands.
There's a real immense quality to this film. If you think that, you know, old films are boring, or in particular, British old films are boring, which many people think are inferior to old Hollywood films, then this is the exception, I think.
But what intrigues me is this is based on a play. It can't be that closely based on a play. I can just imagine a scene where you've got 4 stagehands running on with a cardboard car to run somebody over.
Well, folks, that was Cloudburst from 1951, a thoroughly thrilling revenge tale, and as we all told you there, a giant leap forward in quality from Hammer. In the next episode, we're staying in thriller territory for a tale of mystery, amnesia, and a very twisted marriage. Do make sure you join us for that one. Until then, though, remember that you can keep the conversation going with us at any time by reaching out on the old socials. On Twitter, we are at HouseHammerPod. We're very chatty, so give us a follow and let us know what you thought of Cloudburst. Or if you fancy things a little more long form, you can email us at scream@houseofhammerpodcast.com. Hopefully we'll see you on Saturday, May 14th for our watch-along party of The Lady Craved Excitement. And in any case...
From me, Kev.
From me, Smokey.
From me, Ben Tillison.
And from me, Adam Roach, it simply remains for me to say thank you for visiting us here, and we hope to see you again very soon at the House of Hammer.